Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Residency Prep Vlog series with Dr. Alexa. And today we're going to be checking in with where she's at this point in the match season as we're starting to get interview season underway. So welcome, Dr. Alexa. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for being so patient with this next update. And hi, Tiffany. Thank you for having me back.
Of course. And I think that the patience is something to be expected this time of year with as busy as everything has been, especially leading up to September 29th, application day. So in hindsight, that's, about 3 weeks ago. And we wanted to know from you, how did it go? Did you have any issues that you encountered? How many programs did you apply to, and kind of all those details?
Oh boy. So September was a whirlwind. There were so many things that I felt like I needed to do in order to meet that September 29th deadline. And it was a constant, nonstop thinking about all the little details that had to come together. So there were many components of my application that I wanted to be ready for that date. There's, of course, ERAS with all of the CV components, the MSPE, and the personal statement. Well, that's a little bit separate, but the personal statement. Then the letters of recommendation and my ECFMG certification. So these were things that I was parallelly trying to manage, communicating with different people to make sure that things got done on time. One of the biggest things that was the most frustrating out of all of that was the MSPE. I don't know how it is for other people, but for my school, they do provide this, but it's very difficult because the format that my school uses is not really proper for US standards. And there was a lot of back and forth with the administrators trying to get it up to the quality that we wanted it to be. And when I say we, I have a few other classmates who were applying. So all of us were frantically messaging each other, trying to figure out how to get this MSP put together in a way that would be fitting. So that was very, very stressful. And that actually didn't get uploaded until I think the day before the 29th. So up until then, I was not sleeping. The hard
Were you
thing about it
able
was that,
to Were you
yeah,
able to get it into the format that you wanted it to be in? Do you feel like you were able to resolve it with the administration at your school?
it still wasn't as fancy as a lot of the other ones I'd seen with like charts and graphs and stats, but it had all of the major components. We had trouble even getting the three noteworthy characteristics in because my school wanted each of the things that we wrote into those three components to have some sort of certification or document proving that we did do those things. So for instance, if I volunteered at an organization, I had to now go back to that organization from 3 years ago and ask for a paper that said that I did do that. And then I had to send it to the administrators.
A lot of
So
extra work.
it was a lot of extra work. It was eventually uploaded, and I am so relieved that that's over because the hardest part was that it was out of my control. Everything else, like working on my CV and the personal statement, those were all things that I could, manage my time the way I wanted or needed it. But the MSP was just something I had no control over. So that was very tough. Um, then there was the ERAS. ERAS was, how should I say? It was a lot more time consuming than I had expected, writing about each of the different research experience, volunteering experience, and work experience than I expected. And for that, I am very grateful that I had the residency experts read over it and make recommendations to make it sound a little more formal, a little more put together, because I'm terrible at selling myself. So I felt like the entire thing sounded so bland. And the fact that I had people looking over it, it made me feel a little more comfortable knowing that I was uploading that.
Yeah, that's something I think that we hear from a lot of applicants is that the CV takes so much more time than anticipated because it seems straightforward that you'll just enter in, your experiences and order and the details. But then when it comes to writing those descriptions, I think a lot of people experience writer's block and a little bit of a lack of confidence that it sounds good enough and struggle, like you said, with selling themselves. So I think that a lot of people will relate to what you described. And of course, really glad that Residency Experts was able to help out and give you that little bit of extra confidence.
It was much needed at the time. And you're right, it took so much longer than expected. So whoever is applying next year, make sure that you start that earlier than I did. Then the
Yeah,
personal
actually,
statement. Yeah, sorry.
well, I wanted to put out there for anyone listening who's already, on top of thinking about applying next year, you can always look online for the ERIS worksheet and you can start working on it now. You don't have to wait. It's a really nice template that just kind of guides you through the work experiences and training section. And you can start working on it, save the document on your computer so that when the busy time does start rolling around in June, July, and August, you'll already have a lot of things set up and ready to go so that you're not as stressed and tight on time.
That's a really great tip, especially because you don't get your token, like your ERAS token until the summer. So if you don't know what kind of format or what kind of opportunities you'll be able to put into ERAS, if you have no idea what to expect, it's a lot harder. So wow, that's a very good tip. I wish I'd known that.
Yeah, I think it's for some reason a very well kept secret that there is a
It is,
template
yeah.
available. So, yes, hopefully more people listening to this will know about it and we can get them to spread the word and more people will be more prepared.
Hopefully. So the next up is the personal statement. There was a point where I just couldn't write anything else. I mean, it didn't feel good or even perfect or anywhere close to that, but I just felt like this was the most that I could possibly do. And I was tired of editing and re editing and triple checking every sentence to make sure that it was worthwhile. So the personal statement took a lot of time to write. I also had some help for that with the experts from Residency Experts. So for that, I'm also grateful because they did make a lot of changes. And it's funny because the first time I read the changes they made, I was like, like they haven't changed anything. This is basically what I wrote. And then I lined them up side by side and I realized how much more sophisticated and professional their version sounded compared to my version. And it was just a funny moment where I realized that they had edited it so smoothly that it didn't stop sounding like me, to the point that I didn't even recognize that I didn't write it. So that was nice. I'm very grateful that they did help with that. And when I finally felt like I was just going to submit it and be done with it, it was such a relief to get it off of my shoulders and not have to think about making any more edits.
Sure, that's another big time consuming process that people underestimate. And I really love what you said about thinking at first that there really weren't many changes made. And that's almost ideal from the writer's perspective or from the editor's perspective, that the writer feels this is still my work, this is still my writing. So that's a really cool experience that you shared. Thanks for that.
Thank you guys. And I actually ended up writing a few specific personal statements. That was a question that came up a lot on different platforms, whether or not you should personalize some of the statements to different programs. So I actually I took it one step further and I did a personal statement that was geared towards programs in my geographic area that I had ties to. I'm from New Jersey, so anything in the Northeast was close enough to home that I had different reasons for wanting to practice there. Whereas programs that I applied to that were very far away, say the West Coast, I could still see myself being happy there, but just for very different reasons. So I made a geographically close and geographically far personal statement that was only slightly different. And then I applied to those programs in that way.
Perfect. That's a good tip too. Not necessarily totally different personal statements, but just customizing one specific aspect. I think that's a really smart idea.
Yeah, I hope it worked. I mean, it's interesting because you ask yourself, where do you see yourself practicing? And I'm the type of person who can be happy anywhere. I can really like put myself into that situation, make it feel like home, even though people are going to assume like I don't actually want to go to Ohio. I can see myself being happy in Ohio for four different reasons, but those four different reasons are very different than why I would be happy in New Jersey. So that's something to think about in residency applications. There's such an emphasis on geographical ties or like personal ties to an area, but I don't think that that should limit you in where you apply. If you can see yourself being happy in New Mexico, even though you've never set foot in New Mexico, I think it's worthwhile an application.
Yeah, that's good advice.
So, what else was there? There was the personal statement, the MSPE, ERAS. Oh, and then the letters of recommendation. So this was a little bit my fault because I requested them a little too late and therefore they weren't uploaded on time. I don't know if students know this. I didn't know this originally, but there's an ECFMG processing time. So any letter of recommendation that's uploaded to ERAS by your writer needs to go through ECFMG. Now, when my first letter was uploaded in the summer, this processing time took 2 days. It was super fast. I barely even noticed that there was a delay. But now I'm guessing that it was like the busiest season for ECFMG, and it took, I would say it took 6 days, I think, 5.5 days, depending on time zone, 6 days to upload these letters of recommendation, which meant that 3 out of 4 of my letters of recommendation weren't up by the time I hit submit on the 29th. And they kind of just trickled in the coming days. So that was a
Okay.
big, big source of disappointment for me. Yeah, but it was also my fault.
I think that the ECFMG could also do a better job of letting people know about this processing time, because the 5 to 6 days that you're referencing is actually short compared to some other candidates that I spoke with just prior to the 29th, who shared with me that they'd been waiting for 2+ weeks, that they'd had the letters had been uploaded and they just still had not come through. So I think that it's a really great for next year's applicants to be aware of this. Another thing that speaks to it is that we did a lot of polls right around the 29th, asking people what was delaying your application or what is one thing that you did not have complete. And letters of recommendation were far and beyond weighted the heaviest. So it's definitely something that probably all the people involved in the match process should do a better job of letting people know that this is something you should look at a month or two ahead of time, rather than a week or two ahead of time. And of course, it's really difficult when you're depending on that third party to actually write and upload the letter, because you're dependent on someone else. It's not something you can take care of yourself.
Wow, I did not know that. And my heart goes out to these applicants because it's such an unfair disadvantage and they have no control over how fast this processing time is. And it's so frustrating. So, wow, my heart really goes out to them. And it's so terrible that this process has so many of these hidden obstacles. Um, which in a way it feels that these certain things hit the IMGs a little bit harder. For instance, in an American graduate, if they get a letter of recommendation uploaded, it's immediately visible on ERAS, which is great. So you can have a letter uploaded on the 29th right before you hit submit, for instance, and it'll show up. So this is something to consider, is that we do have as IMGs a few extra hoops to run, but if we stick together and help each other out and really, I don't know, share this information about these obstacles, hopefully we'll come out stronger.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's definitely the goal Match a Resident has, is to share and spread information for IMGs, because a lot of it is not, it's just not out there easily accessible. But the more we do things like this and, keep sharing, both Match a Resident as well as applicants that we work with and ambassadors and you on this residency prep vlog series, like we're really just trying to call attention to all of these little aspects that you don't find out about until you're in the middle of it, and that's not the ideal time. So I guess just throwing out an extra shout out to you for, agreeing to participate in this venture with us and help spread the word.
It is my pleasure, and I really hope that at least a few people will benefit from this. Mm. So
More
in
than a
terms of
few.
I hope so. In terms of applications to programs, this was something that I didn't give that much thought to originally. Um, it's very hard to differentiate all of these phenomenal sounding programs, and because ACGME regulations are so strict on what it takes to be an emergency medicine residency, there's not that much variation between the programs. So mostly what I looked at when applying were two things: location, if I wanted to, or if I could see myself moving to this or that part of the country. And two is their history of taking IMGs, which is an unfortunate limiting factor, but it is the reality of the situation. I used Match a Resident as well as Frida to find all of the programs that seem to have ever taken an IMG in the history of the program.
Okay.
And I actually ended up applying to 178 programs. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying, okay. I was just acknowledging.
So yeah, I applied to 178 programs, which is about 100 less than the total number of programs. So we can safely say that I excluded only 100 programs, but I think that those were the 100 that I wouldn't even have had a tiniest sliver of chance at. So I felt okay excluding those. And in the end, I applied pretty broadly across community programs, academic centers, East Coast, West Coast, Southern area, Northern area. So I applied everywhere a little bit, but trying to be selective about who might consider an IMG. For this, Match Resident and Frida were both very useful. And I also did apply to a few programs that I was really interested in that hadn't taken an IMG, just as, a why not? Like, I might as well give it a go.
Sure. And so now that you have kind of been through this whole process and we're now on the other side of September the 29th, how has the wait been for you? And can you tell us a little bit about the emergency medicine interview process or interview invitation process and things like that?
Sure. So everyone said to kind of put it out of your mind and just go about your day and not really think about it. I set my phone so that every notification was silenced except emails. And I just went about my day, trying not to think about it, which was easy because I had a full-time job, so I was pretty busy. In the early days, I would say in the first week after the 29th, I actually received a few interview invites, which I'm super excited about and cannot wait to interview at those programs. What's interesting and what I didn't expect is that even when you respond to the email really, really soon after, the interview spots fill up so fast that for one of the programs, I only got an interview date like the last week of December. And this was answering the email within, I don't know, 12 minutes or something. So they fill up really, really fast. You have to be on your feet. You have to be kind of addicted to your phone, which I already am, but this was a new level.
Sure.
Yeah. What else? Well, for me, I've been checking Med Twitter a lot. I follow a lot of the residency programs on there, and that kind of gave me an idea of who is releasing interviews and who's not. And it's been nice to see the reaction of program directors as they read our applications. So I've kind of been tracking that. Mm, There was a unified release date. A bunch of programs, I would say between 30 and 40, agreed to all release interview invites on the 20th, which was yesterday. And students could start scheduling applications the following day, so today. So with this 20th deadline, or not deadline, but release date, I was not sure if I should send letters of interest. The thing with letters of interest is that it doesn't seem like there's a good time You never know if it's too early or too late. But my thought process was I don't want to send it before the 20th because you never know. You might have gotten an interview anyway, and then you're just annoying these people. So that's been one of my considerations so far is whether or not to send a letter of interest, especially since yesterday during the unified release, I didn't get any interview invites, so I'm still waiting. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on letters of interest, I'd be happy to hear them.
Letters of interest are definitely something that is getting a lot of attention right now. People are having all the same questions that you have. When is the right time to send it? Is it too early? Is it too late? Will I be annoying if I'm sending an email and they've already got me on their interview list? So you don't want to push too hard. And I think there's a lot of unknowns, just like with a lot of the match application process. We don't know specifically which programs, where they're at in their review process and what they're thinking, and even how receptive they'll be to letters of interest. But at Match a Resident, our line of thinking is that it is a really good idea to send out those letters of interest to your top somewhere between 5 and 30, we'll say, so about an average of 20, your top programs. And those top programs are going to pick really just genuinely the ones that you would be most excited to have the interview at. You can't really tell how well you're going to gel with the culture, with the program director until the interview. So thinking in terms of the one that would really get your heart racing if you got that interview invite, you can choose your top programs and really focus on crafting a really smart letter. So this is almost even higher stakes than your personal statement because you're trying to get some extra attention that your application might not have gotten already. So we do recommend that you are focusing your letter of interest on the program's specific details, not something that you can find on their website, and certainly not something that you would copy and paste or anything like that. But as you do, Dr. Alexa, following Med Twitter and looking at the different residency programs on social media can give a lot of extra insight into the details of the program. So, talking about those little gems of information in your letter of interest and making a connection with those aspects of the program and your own strengths and interest is really the key.
I see. And your recommendation is to already start thinking about sending these out.
Yes, we do think about 2 to 3 weeks from the time that you've sent your application in. So for everybody who did send in the letter of interest or their application on the 29th, right now is right about at that 3 week window. If you're someone who sent in your application later for whatever reason, then you want to wait at least 2 weeks from the time that you sent that particular application in.
Okay. Okay, that's a very, very good tip. So I guess that's what I'm going to spend my next few days doing. And my other question is whether these programs, so when I was applying to programs, I thought of them mostly as like super reach programs, like, out of this world programs versus programs that are really good, but also more within my reach. Do you recommend sending these letters of interest more to these tangible ones or also sending them to your reach programs? What do you think?
Well, what it all really comes down to is your availability in terms of time. So there's nothing to limit you from sending it to all of those programs, the ones that are out of this world and the ones that are good but maybe not out of this world. It's really going to depend on how much time you have to research those programs and put together really smart letters of interest. So for some people, they have time to do that for five. Other people, it could be maybe every single program on their list. They have maybe nothing but time on their hands for some reason. So, if you feel time wise that you have time to do 10 smart letters of interest, then in my opinion, I would say focus five on the out of this world programs and five on the other programs.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Mm. I guess I have to get down to it and start working on these letters soon.
Yes, more writing, just when you thought that you were done having to write. And I'll throw in
No
too,
such thing.
what's that?
I said no such thing as being done. That's how this feels.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you can, just so you know, we at Residency Experts, we do offer just document editing service for anything related to residency. So that could be this letter of interest, your letter of intent later on down the road when we get closer to rank order list time, anything along those lines. The same editors who work on the personal statements and the CVs, they can jump in and help with any kind of communication.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Um, I just want to say that I had a letter of recommendation that was the doctor asked me to draft it. And I'm terrible, honestly, terrible at speaking positively about myself. And I think most of us are very bad at it because it doesn't come naturally. So I wrote a draft and then I sent it to residency experts. And the answer, the edit they sent back, it warmed my heart. It was so beautifully drafted and so much better than anything that I could have written. I was blown away. So, in that sense, if you, like me, suck at writing about yourself, I think that this is a service that you can consider, because it said things that I would never have been brave enough to say about myself. And I think that's what you need in a process that's as competitive as application.
Yeah, and that's one of the really interesting things about Residency Experts as a company is that the writers and editors that they have on staff have such a unique skill set of being, you know, for the most part, highly trained writers with backgrounds, masters in English and masters in education and things of that nature, as well as years of experience being elbow deep in the match application process. So most applicants are going through the process just once, maybe twice. And it's different for the editors on the team because they've seen it just time and time and time again. The familiarity with the documents and what's expected and what makes
Mhm.
them good is it's just a really unique skill set to be able to find. And I'm proud to be able to offer that kind of service for everybody because you guys are worrying about so many things. So to be able to take a little bit of the pressure off when it comes to having polished documents is something that we just love to be able to do.
And it is a valuable skill. So you might not, I mean, I didn't think of it as a skill, and I consider myself a good writer, but this was just this was so far outside anything that I would have managed myself. So I am grateful to the team at Residency Experts for helping my application, and I hope that when all of this is over, I'll be able to match and look back and really thank them and send them letters of, thank you because they helped so much.
That's definitely, I can speak as a former editor myself. It's so amazing to hear from people after the fact when they've matched and just the level of excitement and everything that comes together with that. So please do reach out once that happens, and it's a really nice, kind of circular way to allow things to happen.
Did you have any other questions for me? Is there something we forgot to mention?
I think we definitely have covered a lot in terms of running all the way through, getting into the application, finally submitting, and now where you're at. Do you have any other tips, advice, or any other updates that you want to put out there?
Oh boy. Um, don't be afraid to reach out to the people around you and ask them, or maybe not even ask them, just tell them that you've applied and you're going through this, and many of them will offer to vouch for you. Which, again, it's very hard to ask for these things, especially if you're not the kind of person who will straight up go to someone and say, "Hey, can you call up this program and vouch for me?" But in my experience, I've had multiple attendings so far say, "Yeah, I'll talk to the PD for you," or I'll see if I can call up the APD." And they do. And sometimes you don't even have to ask them. Sometimes you just have to engage them in conversation and say, "Hi, so I've submitted my applications to this and this program, and thank you for writing me your letter of recommendation. It's been huge help," so on and so forth. And many of them will just offer to do it for you. If they don't, well, I've never asked somebody to call someone on my behalf, but I'm almost positive that if your relationship is good enough with someone, that they will do it because they want to help.
That is a really excellent tip. So and not one that I've actually heard before. So I think it's really smart, like you said, reaching out to mentors and your letter writers to see if you can get that extra push, someone to speak on your behalf. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that one.
And I know it feels weird, and honestly, I have to be transparent and say that when I did get an interview invite as a result of one of these vouching for me type phone calls, it felt a little bit like I didn't earn it. Like it was through contacts, and it wasn't because I was a good enough candidate. It was just as a favor to a friend. And I guess I want to say that that's most likely not the case. I would say 98% of cases, that's not the thought process that you should be having, because genuinely have to consider that most of these PDs, they get over 1,000 applications to look through, and it's just so easy to fall through the cracks. So most of these phone calls, all they result in is somebody actually taking a second look at your application, and then if they consider you worthy enough, they'll call you in for an interview, but they will not call you in for an interview most likely just as a favor. So don't consider yourself less worthy because somebody had to call on your behalf.
You said that perfectly. Thank you for the additional insight into thinking about this ask, because it is a big ask. And like you said, I can see where maybe it's uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, that little bit of extra attention might be what your application needed to be able to get the interview invite. So that's perfect. If there's
I really wish,
anything
no,
else.
no, I was just gonna say that I'm rooting for you guys. I'm rooting for me. I'm rooting for all of us. I know it's a really tough time, so speak to your friends and speak to your family and tell them what you're going through and ask for help if you need it.
And the same is true from everybody on the Match a Resident and the residency experts teams. We are rooting for you, Dr. Alexa, and for IMGs and for all applicants. Actually, we're just hoping for success for as many people as possible. And as always, here to offer support and guidance and insight as much as we can.
Thank you
So
so
with
much
that,
for everything you've done so far.
yeah, you are extremely welcome. And with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap things up. And we're going to look forward to hearing back from you, Dr. Alexa, with an interview update in the coming weeks and months, how your interviews are going, and even letting us know how you have chosen to prepare for interviews and some reflections about that.
I cannot wait.
All right. Thanks so much. And we'll talk next time.
Bye, everyone, and thanks for listening.